Welcome to the Radical Recovery Summit. Maybe we could start with you introducing yourself and let us know what your connection is with the whole field of recovery, how you got into it, what is it that you do?
I'm recovered.
You're recovered.
Yeah, that's my connection to the field of recovery.
How did that happen?
Well, I was really struck sober, actually. So I can tell you the story. And this is obviously in the context of an action figure. Yeah. We're not speaking from the absolute. We are from, but we're not
right.
Talking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, to me, I had alcoholism, the way I define alcoholism, which is like an irritability, restlessness, and discontentment, mostly because of the mental agitation and the meaning it's given things. So I had that for a while, probably after about 6 or 7. The obsession with self was quite strong. And then about 13, I started to drink and use. And as soon as I started to drink, I realized quickly I had magnetic appeal to people in uniform. I started to have a lot of consequences with authorities. And that went on for the rest of my active life in that area. I've been run over twice in one night. A lot of things have happened, which would be almost impossible to do if you set out to do them. It's happened based on, but like we say in recovery, every time I drank, I didn't get in trouble, but every time I got in trouble, I'd been drinking music. So that's the pattern. So, but the necessity to drink and use is very strong. And the alcoholic or addict of my type is I'm willing to pay any consequence tomorrow not to feel uncomfortable now. That's imperative. Because the mental state is really playing with time in hindsight. It's playing with time. So when you have that urge, it's such an immediate drive. You have to do almost anything right now to get what you want. So the mental addiction plays with time quite a lot. It says like when you're feeling bad, it's going to last forever. And then when you're feeling good, it's going to be very fleeting. Yeah. So it plays time like an accordion a lot of ways. So what happened to me is my life was tattooed basically by the addiction. So I went to 3 months of a program when I was young in the Bronx, New York. I got arrested many, many times, overdosed, ended up in a program in San Francisco in 1985 called Delancey Street, which was a live-in program.
I'm familiar with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went in there. I knew a little bit about it because a girlfriend of mine tried to drop me off there about 6 months before I went. She became my ex-girlfriend very quickly, but she had tried to get rid of me. And then when another day where the floor had dropped out, I remembered this place. So I walked down there and I sat on a bench and waited for them to do whatever they're going to do with me. So they interview you, and I don't think there's a high bar of standards they're looking for a person, but I must have met them. So they accepted me. And then I was in that program for 2 years. I lived there. And I really actually thrive in an institutional setting. I do much better when people are telling me what to do. So I lived there for 85 to 87, went to college, actually felt quite good there. I had friends, I was participating. I ran the entertainment division of the place. So I was a very popular person because a lot of people could never leave the place for the first year. So I got all the videos,
okay.
scheduling. So I was like the czar of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be dealing with 300 people. So it was quite good. I had to think of what other people would like of that. So I stayed there for 2 years, and then they had another meeting with me about 20 months into it, and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to stay for 5 more years, make a commitment." And I said, "Well, Are there any other options? I don't know if I want to stay 5 more years. And they said, yeah, there's a workout program. And the Delancey Street was pretty trippy because they had a very good advertising campaign. They worked very close to with the city of San Francisco. We used to go politicking. We would give out leaflets for certain candidates. Yeah. So they got a lot of political favors. And they had a great idea. They said their success rate was like 98% or something. But you had to read the fine print. The only way you could stay sober there was never to leave Delancey Street
Okay.
the rest of your life. So I wasn't keen on that. So I went into this program, followed it for 4 months. You had to get a job, outside job, open a checking account, get a car. And after 4 months, you could move out if you found a place to live. So I did, found a place to live. Moved in, and very shortly thereafter, that irritability and restlessness and discontent became very loud. And I listened to it, and I went to where it told me, which is go back to an old bar I used to go to. Because it had come to a conclusion after about a year in the program, Delancey Street, that my problem was narcotics, which was true, but I could probably drink. I didn't run this by anyone in the program. I just sort of filed it away. And when I got out, that was still there. So I decided I could drink. I went to this bar I knew. I had my first beer in over 2 years. And nothing happened. I had a second beer. Halfway through, it wasn't enough for me. I wanted more. Whatever more is. Could be more alcohol, but for me, it's narcotics. So I looked around the room. Same old guy that used to sell more there was selling it. So I kissed his ass, got some more, went to my car and did some more. And then I went on a 10-month run. And really, there's a statement in recovery called pitiful, demoralized, incomprehensibly pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. I have felt that many, many times. So this was where I landed once again. So 10 months, I ended up in a trailer park, March 20th, I think, 1988. And I'm just trying to drink. I didn't know the guy who I was with. I came to, basically, and I was sitting in his trailer, drinking a cheap bottle of vodka, Royal Gate vodka. And I looked at him and I said to myself, he had a big head, bulbous nose, varicose veins. And I said to myself, this guy's a bum. But lo and behold, he was looking at me like I was a bum. And that was the moment of clarity, we say in AA. It was almost like a portal opened and a download occurred into whatever I am, whatever mail slot this is. And it didn't stop in my head because I had admitted many times I was an alcoholic to get alcohol and shit. It went to what you would call your innermost. And it was a CNN news flash, not a headline. I'll use a different word, but it was, I'm screwed. Yeah. So that's never changed ever since for 29 years. So I realized I'm not managerial quality, like to my core, as this GPS, that I had been following. And so suddenly I got to stay at someone's house that night, an ex-girlfriend. And the next day I went to my first meeting, and I've been going ever since. But see, to me, it's been, in a way, very easy because the urge was removed. I don't have an urge, and I haven't thought of or felt like doing drugs or alcohol 29 years. So I don't even need skillful means, really. I need a way of life to stay sober and to deal with what we recover from. We don't recover from drinking, obviously. I recovered from drinking one day. But you recover, that's called recovery. It's not called stop drinking. Recovery is that you recover from what obviously motivates or produces the need to drink and use. And it could be shopping or sex, whatever. Just trying to get some immediate relief from a chronic condition. So that's what happened. And I've been, I participated in AA for a long time now, 29 years. And, the thing isn't about getting sober, it's staying sober. because the action figure is of time. We're not, but the action figure is. So you have to have a way of life. See, especially for people like me, because the way of life I lived was not, uh, it wasn't in sync with sound principles. Yeah, it wasn't in sync. It didn't. It worked on it worked on a very failed premise and just exasperated it over and over again with terrible strategies. So I needed a new way of life. Now, Delancey Street tried to introduce me one, but it would have to be in an institutional setting. AA has allowed me to be a free range alcoholic or drug addict, and it's just more suitable for me. So that's it for that. I've just been in recovery a long time, and yeah.
So when you had the urge to drink or use narcotics was removed, did you also what happened to that energy that was driving that? Is that what dissipated as well?
Yes, it was like a radioisotope. Yeah. In other words, the battery of the car was disengaged. Yeah. So I've never had an urge to drink or use, so I don't need a skillful means to fight it. I need a way of life. Yeah. So that the recovery from the real causes and conditions can have a safe enough space to continue. Because this operation has to be mobile. Yeah. I'm not going to go into another garage for 2 years to be worked on. That's while I'm living. So AA provides that. Just like here, we have 700 meetings a week. I mean, what church has 700 meetings a week? What spiritual group meets 700 times a week? Because we know what we're up against, which is the problem resides in the mind. So the whole program is totally based on the willingness or the lack of willingness of the participant. And like we say where I live, you know, if someone's ready, you can't say anything wrong. If someone's not ready, you can't say anything right. So, and I'm a real believer in we do a lot of disservice by trying to keep people from their bottom. I think life's the best teacher. And I think what a lot of people call compassion truly isn't compassion.
What is it?
It's an enabling in a way. Because I know when I came in, really, I hated the people that let me get away with murder, really. I did, deep down. I needed a big fucking boot up my ass, yeah, literally. So, you know, what's radical recovery? Really. Radical recovery, you know, looks quite ordinary, in my view. So, and you know, there's like the Course in Miracles says, there's a lot of levels. So there's level confusion. And I'm a believer that a lot of times people are trying to apply a solution from one level to another level where it doesn't work, which is sort of like someone is on one level where his house is on fire and he's getting burnt up. He doesn't need the message, there is no house and there's no fire. He needs a pail of water. And maybe when the fire, quote unquote, is out, you can entertain other possibilities. But people trying to use non-duality as a skillful means doesn't work for me, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's been my experience as well.
Yeah, so to me, non-duality illuminates whatever path you're on. It's not a path to illumination. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't like when everyone's trying to do all this crossbreeding. I don't think it works, really. Because I see a lot of drunk Buddhists. You know, if AA is for you, just like the Course in Miracles says, hey, if you're reading this book may be for you. So if you find yourself in an AA meeting, maybe AA is for you. Yeah? Yeah. Any other questions? Or
I'd like to hear you talk a bit more about thought and thinking and how that kind of relates to recovery and relates to addiction. My sense is that a lot of the thought is what underlies the need to get away.
For sure. Well, I see it almost like a three-pronged thing. There's thought, perception, and memory. Yeah. I call it the mental processes. I don't like to call what we call the ordinary mind. I think it's all mental process. So for me, the problem resides in the mind, like we say in AA. So you can't obviously seek a solution through what's causing seemingly the problem. Yeah. So you can't think yourself out of thought. So in AA, we actually do ourselves out of thinking. So you take action, you take right action, and it produces right thinking. You don't try to get right thinking and keep your same old actions going. It doesn't work. Yeah. I don't think that's a foreverness in AA, but in the beginning for sure. So the thoughts, to me, I don't think it's the thoughts that drive us crazy. It's what allows the thoughts to drive us crazy is the mind, the identification as the thinker, really. My idea in AA, I don't believe it's obsession with self. I believe it's identification as a self. And I think the obsession with self is how the mental state reinforces the identification. So
can you go deeper into that, the identification? How does that work?
The identification is, I believe, through seeing stuff, that the mental process is in an activity, and that activity it's in the act of being identified as a self. Yeah. So some people would say, well, there's part of that's a verb, and then there's noun of self. It's a whole verb to me. The act of being identified as a self is the verbing. Yeah, it's the activity. So the mental state is always through thought and interpreting feelings and memories. It's in the act of being identified as a self. It's in the act of being the one the memories are about, the one who's the thinker of the thoughts, the one who's the feeler of the feelings, the one who's the doer of the doing. So to me, it's claimed, its main movement is claiming. So it claims whatever it comes in contact with. So it cognizes thoughts. It becomes aware of thoughts. And then it uses the thoughts to claim that there's a thinker of them. Yeah. That's where I think the bondage is. So thoughts are just thoughts, because you could have a thought, and if I see it as yours, it has no effect on me. But the same thought held as mine could have a huge effect. So it's not the thought, obviously. The thought is just being used. It's the my. And what's using it is us, really. I believe we're reality. Like the Course in Miracles would say, they say we are the dreamer of the dream. I don't believe in nouns, so I believe we are the dreaming of the dreaming, and we're in the forgetting of, and this is the act of being identified as self. This is what produces a seeming forgetting of what we are. So the act of being identified as self promotes a seeming forgetting of what we are, and we take ourselves to be the dreamt, yeah, which is whatever can be seen. So this can be dreamt. Like Huang Po, a great master, says, whatever can be perceived cannot be perceiving. So this is the dreamt. So now the perceiving becomes identified as the perceived.
Right.
And then the mental state, its whole story is to keep being in the act of being identified as a self, because you can't be a self, but you can seemingly be in the act of being identified as a self. And I would say that's closer to what's happening. It can never complete the mission, but it can seem to be so. See, because what it does, it's very tricky, because it's a process that comes after that implies it's before. So when you're listening to all of the activity of being identified as a self, there's a feeling that there's a you listening to it. See? So the product implies it's before the production. It's unbelievable, really, if you see it. So, because we think there's time like linear, mental state's not playing by those rules. It's implying what comes after to be before, like a lot of the time. Yeah. So you're an afterthought that's implied to be before thoughts. Yeah, that's why you can assume you're the thinker, because you believe you're before thoughts, but you're not. The idea of being a thinker is a thought. This is what I believe is the act of being identified as a self. So you're not a self, but in a sense, at that point, you're not really sensing what you are because you're believing the act of being identified as a self. So you're in the act of being identified as, and you never become a self because it's impossible. So basically, in time, what's not so can seem to be so in time. So in no time, this is totally impossibility. In time, it can seem to be that I'm a self. Yeah.
Because of the accumulation of the experience of
all the claiming of it all. It's sort of like if you saw it as consciousness, no thingness, entertaining an idea like bait. And once it grabs the bait, it becomes a fish, seemingly. And then when it becomes a seeming fish, it feels it's a historical fish. So now there's a huge story of being a fish for quite a while, and then a future projection, now I'm going to be a fish. Happens right now, yeah? Once it bites. So the bait here is the act of being identified as a self. And then, all right, now you're that which bit. You were there before, and you've been biting for a long time, and you're going to be biting. Yes, that's it. So when that's in place, when the identification is as a self is in place, seemingly, then your wanting to be free is always based on as that. That ain't freedom. You see, that's the driving force of addiction. Addiction never satiates because it's erroneous. It's off. You're trying to get out of something you're not in. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it gets used to reinforce the idea that you're in something. You think you're getting out, and spirituality is not fucking immune to that.
Right.
It's just more flamboyant, but there's spiritual seeking is an addiction. You're shooting up for peak experiences. Yeah, you go through some hellish thing, and then you have a great whack, and then it's like shooting dope. It's just the same thing, really. And you suffer the pangs and the remorse when you feel like you've lost the awakening, which is insane. So it's just like addiction, same fucking thing. We think, oh, that's 5,000 years old. But mental addiction is hundreds of thousands of years old. See me right now. It's not been 100, but right now. Yeah. So for me, my whole drive was to get out of self, but as a self. And I share this at the talks. Now, if you looked at me as a spiritual practitioner, there could be you could find tons of faults. Yeah. I only did maybe 7 retreats, and I didn't see this person or that person. I didn't circumambulate enough statues. So you could find my resume a lot of holes in it. And so, of course, all those holes could be turned into self-blame, because self-centeredness. But I would match my devotion to drugs, shooting cocaine, with any fucking spiritual devotee in the history of spirituality. Hanuman, the monkey, I was right there. I did anything for cocaine. I loved cocaine. I fucking turned my whole will and my life over to cocaine. I didn't care if I died every night shooting up cocaine. Completely. And I'm telling you, you cannot transcend an imaginary place. I should have gotten out of here with drug addiction. I was a fucking pro at drug addiction. I didn't, there was no freaking escape. Not because I didn't do enough. I did way too much. It's because you cannot get out of an imaginary place. Yeah? So that's the point to me. Now I'm finally out of here by being completely here. And the only reason why I can be completely here is I know it's not true. If it was true, I'd want to get out of here. It would make total sense to get out of this place. Now I realize it's not true. So I'm completely in the place and obviously out of the place in a weird way. So I think there is, the way I see things work really has a logic to itself once you get keyed into it. And then you'll see how illogical the insanity of the self-centered system is. Yeah? Totally, totally insane. You're trying to get out of something you can't be in. and you're trying to get in, let's say the moment, which you can't be out of. Fully fucking ass backwards. If that premise is in place, it's just geometrically progressing in time and space. Is getting more neurotic, more flipped out, more exotic, trying exotic solutions, but you can't. It's not working. Nothing radical to me would be always available at all times. Not like fucking hanging over a cliff with a shaman and doing tons of shit like that. I'm talking having availability of relief at all times, no matter what's fucking going on. That to me is radical. It's radical ordinariness, really. Yeah.
Why do people not see that? What's in the way of people?
Because there's people.
It's just part of how we operate?
We don't, but it's the system, sure, and there's nothing right or wrong with it. To me, it's like the Course says it beautifully. It says, you and I are the dreaming of the dream, and what we're going to do is we're going to dream ourselves out of the dream, like an interview like this. And as we do, the dream's going to get happier. Not forever, it's going to end, but it's going to get happier. That's what I believe is happening here. Some people are dragging their feet, other people are running with it, but it's inevitably, nothing ever really happened here, hasn't. Nothing's changed the unchangeable. No heinous crime I committed, which I have committed many, has left any lasting effect on what is. I mean, yeah. So, because first of all, people they still think it's an experience. They're looking for a fucking experience in non-duality, which it doesn't offer an experience. If it did, it wouldn't be non-duality. It would be something else, It would be non-duality in duality, yeah? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you could sell it, but it doesn't have any experience. People keep wanting to have it. They want to be there to get it. It's like a stubborn, like they can't seem, because I did a talk in Ireland, and a guy was there who had been listening to the talks, the website. And then he says, you seem to imply that you're not a body quite a lot and stuff like that. And he says, it seems like it's so easy to imply it, but I find it super difficult. And I go, yeah, because what's saying that is the body. The brain is saying it's super difficult to realize it's not a body. Of course it is, because it's part of the body. How is system isn't going to go, okay, it's going to try to negate everything other than the system. If it can't absorb it, it'll just say, fuck it, You have to see, it's just seeing what you're not is the clue to me. Not trying to convince what you're not to be what it's not, Just fucking see what you're not. And that's what you are, is basically the seeing of what you're not. So I don't know why. With people on the consequential level of AA, we're overmatched. Something has us. I call it a parasite, yeah? Some other people call it a demonic intelligence, but I believe alcoholism is like a mental parasite that affixes on the root of self-centeredness, of identification as self. So identification as self would be basically the custom model would, let's say, be acoustic. And then you add alcoholism and it's electric, so the fucking solos are longer and more shit happens. And bigger drum solos.
More intense, it's louder.
It has to amplify something already in place, which is identification as a self. To me. And that's why a lot of times you get relief from alcoholism, but you still don't get relief from the identification as self. People still believe the head is still harvesting a lot of guilt and shame based on past behaviors they did while under the influence, when our first step says you were powerless over alcohol. So when I was under the influence, like we usually say in AA, it's like dancing with a gorilla. I was going to stop when the gorilla wanted to stop. That seems to give you an out from all that guilt and shame that's being harvested. Because I
Mhm.
was apt to do almost anything under the influence. Yet the head will still keep harvesting because the identification of self isn't necessarily affected by getting relief from alcoholism.
Right.
It isn't. So to me, that's the mother of it all. The mother of all addictions is everyone, all the other addictions are trying to get out of that addiction, which is the mental state's addiction to being a self. That's how I see it. But, when people come in, you deal with the level that they're presenting as.
So if someone comes in with a lot of trauma, childhood trauma or whatever, and there's a fear of not not being comfortable being present with the energy and the memories, all that stuff, very identified with that experience, and they just want out. So how does that relate to what you've been just talking about with identification with the self?
Well, they can always ask, who is it that wants out? You can always use self-inquiry as a
Mhm.
skillful means there. Ask, who is it that wants to get out? And if they've had a lot of trauma, I would address it with body work mostly. I would go through the body with that.
What
Don't
kind
waste
of
time. I
right.
don't know. I haven't done it in a long time, but when I was doing it, I would go to energetic body workers or shamanistic body workers. Yeah. But I wouldn't go through the middle talking it out. I do.
I know that there seems to be a consensus forming that working in the body is the way to work with trauma. That it's helpful to understand some of the concepts about it, but really it's in the body, it's stored in the body, it's felt in the body. We need to work it through the body.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that I'm keeping up on anything, but yeah, that's
But
my
it makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
You've been around the recovery world for a long time and you do a lot of talks and you talk to a lot of people. What is your sense of what really works? Like you must have met so many people who have relapsed and have recovered and are in recovery. All there's just all kinds of things going on.
Well, at the end, that's all based on the situation. Like if I did a talk on the 12 steps, it would be different every day that I gave a talk.
Hmm.
But if I'm being available to somebody, I can read them somewhat and then just attempt to say, like a person comes to me and they're in active alcoholism and yet they want to entertain non-duality. I just say, get sober first. But pointless. You're trying to dance around the elephant in the room. You got to address the freaking, you know, you're getting arrested last night and shit. Why would you want to come to a satsang? Just
Right.
fucking, yeah. You have to have a way of life. So I don't know. I really don't know any road answer to anything. I just feel it out. I'm a
Okay.
real believer in level confusion, of course, where mind is manifesting at any given time on different levels. And to me, being of service has a lot to do with flexibility,
Hmm.
not dogmatic approach, but a flexible one. Yeah.
So the work that you do with people is just meeting them, whatever's happening, just being present with them, and then feeling it out from there.
Well, I have a couple different seat assignments. I'm in recovery, so I work with people there differently
Hmm.
because in non-duality, it's not about help. You
What do you
know,
mean?
I don't want to be helpful in non-duality. That to me it doesn't go with it. I want to leave people with nothing on a consistent basis, so then they can see it's everything. Yeah, and sometimes you need to starve them of help. They'll find out they're actually inherently okay. Yeah. AA is a different story. Their help is helpful. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, usually I read people the way I read them. Sometimes some of them need to get the externals down first. They got to go to a number of meetings, go to different kinds of meetings, sit in the front, pay attention, say hello to newcomers. Basically do that for a while. Let the get a sense of identification with the problem. Yeah. And then start doing the work, step work. And to me, I like to approach it with seeing how there's a statement on page 64 in the big book that I don't believe gets presented correctly in most cases. So I do it this way. So it says, being convinced, which is a present tense activity. I'm being convinced right now by my own observation that that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. Yeah. I'm convinced of that now. I am right now convinced of that. Yes? So it's present tense. Being convinced that self, meaning the feeling to me, the feeling of being a long-lasting, independent, separate entity. I don't see the word self to represent ego. I don't believe. See, to me, ego, if you listen to people share, they'll say, I have an ego, or I lost an ego. What is that had an ego? What is that lost an ego? To me, that's the bondage of self, is the sense of one. Yeah? Ego to me is an objectification of self by self. That's all it is to me. I think it's a fucking goose hunt. It's a wild goose hunt to try to work on that. Yeah? Humbly. So, being convinced that self, because he could have said being convinced that ego manifests in various ways, but he doesn't. He says being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what has defeated us. So he separates the two, which is beautiful. We're the us, and then there's this foreign installment or a fucking GPS or parasite self that when it somehow attaches or adheres to this system can defeat it through its manifestations. All right, so it says if you're convinced of that, let's look at its common manifestations. Its meaning self. All right, what are the manifestations of that failed system called self? First one is resentment. Yeah. So if you follow the logic, then it would dispute why people keep calling the resentment theirs if it's a manifestation of self. And fear, their fear, my fear, when it's not your fear. It's being manifested, it's self-manifesting through you. And you're demonstrating the activity of the identification of self by calling its manifestations yours. You are right now in the act of being identified as self. That's why people don't see it, because they're looking for it. It's a verb. It's all verbing. And they're doing it. Yeah? They're in the act. There is no self. There's reality. Reality is entertaining the idea that there's a self. Yeah? If it believes it, it seems to be so. If it doesn't believe it, it seems not to be so. As Jesus says, as you believe, so it is. So basically, this is what's happening. This whole place is an activity. Nothing's happening to us. It's all happening. So if you can see it in that view, you'll see it. And what's beautiful about activities, they can stop. Yes? If you see it as an activity, and you're the longer activity, which is the dreaming of, then a possibility arises that wasn't available before. Like it happened to me distinctly around my 9th year sobriety, when I saw self as a foreign installment. The next thing I could do is I could entertain being free from it. As soon as I saw it wasn't me, hey, I can be free from it, where before it was always being free as it, or through it, or by it. As that is going to become free. It's total craziness. So as soon as the horse was put before the cart, things have made sense ever since. And it's actually, at this point, was the last answer, because I haven't looked for any other fucking answer in years. So obviously, I would say the greatest answer of all would be the last time you needed an answer. And so Bama. How
Mm.
does this apply in AA? Fuck, it applies greatly. Because if you get to the exact nature of wrong, you'll see it as identification as something you're not. Then what happens? Thoughts are seen more as thoughts than yours. Feelings are feelings. They come and go, not your feelings, not spinning a huge web that goes past and future. Actions, you're much more able to accept what you've done because you're not the doing of it, really. So you become more accountable than ever. All this starts happening, and then you know the tree by its fruits. You recognize the solution is an activity also. You recognize the solution, the problem from the solution. That's the only way you're ever going to really see it. You can't see it from the problem. It's impossible. Right. It's all freaking. It's like being a professor of holes, but you're still falling into holes. What's the point of that knowledge? Yeah. So people think they're great knowers of it, but that doesn't mean squat. It's being it right now. That's the freedom. The freedom is an activity that I'm entertaining right now. Mm-hmm. Not by I'm entertaining it, but just having certain things been revealed, I'm in the entertaining of I can't be anywhere else. So I'm not trying to get into the moment. I cannot believe you could ever be out of a moment. So it's all no effort or thought to be here because I can't be anywhere else. See, it's simple. Yeah. And then you're available to people, not by, oh, I'm available to people. It's just your natural state and you're being of service because you're available. So it's different than doing service to be of service. It's much a different ballgame.
Well, and part of what happens when we're really wrapped up in thought is that we're not really available.
Of course not. Well, we're available to the thoughts.
To the thoughts, but not.
They're about past and future, so therefore we're not available now. Of course. That's what the mental state wants. It wants attention. Mm-hmm. Your interest in attention is presence. Yeah, it wants to dispel the putting a lot of thought and interest into yesterday and tomorrow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So people are totally here, but spaced out being here. Because they're entertaining what's not happening more than what's happening. And that's all that is cherishing of self. Really.
So when people are very hooked in their past in particular, that's part of recovery is working on not being so hooked with the past.
Well, you do the inventory and then you do the ninth step.
And then the
ninth step will be the greatest freeing of the past. Right. Because you'll face it, and then you'll have the sense that you don't shut the door on it, nor do you regret it anymore. So you can learn from the past, but it's not a giant hallway of regrets and remorse or guilt or shame. It's a matter now you can pass on what you learned to other people. Yeah. So the ninth step was the biggest, really one of the biggest demonstration of all the steps for me was the ninth step when I made amends to everybody. And I was willing to make amends to the people I couldn't find, but I was willing to. Mm-hmm. That had the greatest effect because I truly, really showed up in my own life. I was present now, not as Paul, that which is, who wants to waste any time trying to get what's not in the moment into the moment? I could care fucking less about it. But having that sort of dispersed, and then you sense your real presence, or you like your original face in Zen, which isn't a face. Now, that to me, I got a lot of sense of that in the ninth step after I did my amends. Because I had been conveniently avoiding tons of it, but I was paying a huge amount of storage and security guards to keep it all at bay. It's quite freeing when I'll give you an example. This was awesome to me. I got sober and there was a meeting in a town part of San Francisco called North Beach, Thursday night. And I liked this meeting. And San Francisco, parking is a premium, very difficult to find parking spaces. So I would drive to North Beach And I'd never go down this one street because there was a market on that street, Rosie's Market. And when I was using drugs, I was living in North Beach for a time, and I used to steal shit from this market every day. A couple of 16-ounce beers and some flat steaks and shit I put in the back with a long overcoat. Every day I'd go there and get some beer and food. And so I didn't want to go. So I would never even look for a parking space on that. This went on for months because the old strategy was still in place: avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it, I'm just going to go there. And I went there and I asked where the manager is. They said upstairs. I went upstairs and I told them, hey, I'm in a program recovery. And, I used to live here and I stole a lot of stuff from here. I like to give you 50 something bucks for it. So he took the money and I walked out. And I never thought of Rosie's Market ever again. That's what it's like. You're occupied by the past when it's not dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
When it's dealt with, you're free from it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can try to say there is no past, but I'll tell you, on some level, that may not sink in. If you just make the freaking amends as the action figure, you'll get some relief. Yeah. A lot of people are trying to use non-duality to get out of doing the steps and shit. They say, oh, there is no self. It's all, none of that works. It doesn't work. Yeah?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, we still have the energy in our body from all of that. And
and so move your body to that place and tell what happened. And always, I was taught always to mention recovery when you're making the amends. I do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when that happened, you were 9 years into it.
No, the 9th step I did in the first year or two.
No, not the amends.
The other.
That realization.
Yes, it was leaking in, but then it crossed the line to like 51% of the stock moved over. Yeah. So I saw the word self in a whole new light, and the whole book meant a lot. I took out of the book a lot of new meaning from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically how that's what I was doing. Since I was 3 years sober, I started doing talks in AA. And then we did a website, and people from outside of AA got in touch with me. And then I started doing talks at places. Then I saw spiritual seeking as an addiction. And then I got niched into non-duality or something. All I was trying to do was be available to people in recovery. And then the website, a lot of other people not in recovery got in touch with me. So now I do a lot of stuff with people without, but I think everyone's trying to recover from something. Yeah.
So when you're working with someone or when someone has an addiction to spiritual seeking, part of it is the high of the experience. How do you work with people around that?
Well, I do it with jokes usually. Yeah. Like, I've done it at meetings I've done. See, the difference between that addiction and drug addiction is there's no intervention with spiritual addiction. So I act like I'm taking someone out of the room, put down those DVDs, sign up for another retreat. It's through humor, really. Basically showing how absurd it is and that it's no different than other addictions. It's not in a rarefied position. Selfing will claim it just as easy as it will a fucking act of stealing us from a drugstore. Right. It's going to claim the spiritual practices. Yeah. There's a famous saying I love of Ramana. It usually implies the solution is self-inquiry, but I just state the problem, which is the presupposing of a non-existent thing that wants to get salvation for the non-existent thing. That's basically the essence of the act of being identified as self. So it's not a supposing or assuming, but it pre-assumes. So when you assume it and the reality believes it, it puts it prior to what it came after, really. That's the heist I find. And it says, all right, if that's going on, then your spiritual practices themselves are reinforcing the non-existent thing. How can they destroy it? So I think that's what spiritually seeking falls under in most cases. To me, it's loss of interest is the gateway to what's happening, not interest. Loss of interest.
Loss of interest in thought,
Loss of
identification.
interest in a lot of things. Spirituality. Loss of interest in a lot of fucking things. That to me is presence. Presence is undirected interest and attention, basically. The mental state wants to constantly direct our interest and attention. When you get free to that, that's the sense of presence. It's undirected interest, intention. It's just there, has enough to deal with what's happening, and it's like a weather front. Yeah. So I find it's really more about a loss of interest in things than a gaining interest in anything. Yeah, the non-duality.
People are very hooked on this idea that they have to figure it out, resolve it.
Yeah, well, that's not people; it's the mental state.
The mental state. Yeah.
If you saw it, you wouldn't spend much time trying to change the mental state's activities. You would just see it's not you, and then the lighting and the volume would go down. It would still go on, but you wouldn't be listening to it as much. Yeah, but taking yourself to be it and then trying to change it through it, to me, is failed.
I don't think there's anything that's more radical than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it expresses greatly in ordinariness. Really. Mm-hmm. It really has a field day in ordinariness. Yeah. I mean, you can hear the birds singing and just see, we're all awake, basically. And then here, you can seem to be awake to that, or you can seem not to be awake to that. It doesn't change the fact. It's just one activity will make you seem to be unawake to it. Other activities will make you seem to be awake to it. Yeah, but the inherent awakeness is always available at all times. Yeah. And people who seem not to be awake, they haven't changed the fact at all. So, yeah, every night the fact reigns supreme. They go to sleep and then they wake up and they seem not to be awake the rest of all day. And they think the thing at night was a dream because they don't realize this is a dream, dreaming. They think this is real, and they judge the dream from this reality, and they find a separation where there isn't any. Like they say, this is just the awake dream. Yeah, same thing. What the hell? You know, I'm really giving up the idea anyone has to do anything unless they have to do something. You know? They have to get sober, they better get sober. They have to meditate, they better meditate. Yeah. Do they have to meditate? No. But if they believe they have to meditate, they better. Remember the idea of playing God? Big thing in AA. So I like to say, all right, so maybe you're in the act of playing God, and then you hear the message, you got to quit playing God. Now, that which is playing God, if it tries to quit playing God, isn't that playing God? And wouldn't it go on ad infinitum? How's there any way out? Just see you're not that which is playing God. Yeah. Then it doesn't matter if that thing quits or not. It doesn't matter. Because God now has seen that that's not God. Yeah. I mean, we have to be reality. I don't see us as anything else. Yeah. How could false evidence appear real unless it appeared real to what's real? Yeah. So we're reality. Entertaining that we're not. Doesn't change a damn thing, but it can seem to in time. Yeah.
Well, and there we get back to time again.
Time is huge here. It's the biggest influence of all. Oh, unbelievable. It's the main plank of dreaming, I would say. You need space to dream, I guess, but time, that's where all the magic is happening. Selfing is a magician, a time musician. It says that which comes after him is before. That's its fucking magic act. Yeah. Point is maybe you're not going to change it. Why not? But if you didn't take yourself so seriously, you'd be able to travel lighter through it all. Yeah. And really, after a while of that happening, you realize what more do you want, basically. You may call it enlightenment, but really, if you felt satisfied and content right now, you wouldn't be thinking or looking for enlightenment. I'm telling you. You would have absolutely no interest in it.
Yeah, you'd just be listening to the bird.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of this.
Well,
and so does Scott, and it'll be interesting. I'm glad that your voice is part of this summit, because it's a deeper level than what a lot of people would be really looking at it from, and it's important to have this as part of that. Paul is the author of 2 books, Under Arrest and The Escape to Everywhere. Both are available through his website and on Amazon. You can contact Paul and learn more about his work at his website, www.zenbitchslap.com, ZenBitchSlap.com, and on his YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Go to Killaby.com, Radical Recovery Summit 2017, for the full schedule of speakers.